Hi, my name is Cindy Mazer, and I am the ADR Director at FEMA. That's Alternative Dispute Resolution at FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. I'm also the chair of the Interagency ADR Working Group, and that's their subsection, that's Workplace Conflict Management. So on behalf of those two organizations, I want to thank you for being here. It's just a beautiful day, so I'm appreciative of the fact that you're here in the audience. And I want to take a minute to thank the army of people who make this possible. So upstairs, when you came in the door, Janet Frymuth and Brooke Dubois were up there helping you get in. And we have so many support people, but we have Pam Pontillo. Pam, would you just raise your hand 1 second? Thank you. And we have Lee Blackard and Bill Schwartz. So those are people in the room. And we have Mohammed Jalil and Anwar Mallory, just so many people, Robert Cooper and Elizabeth Bissell from my staff, so many people work together to make this a successful program. And if you followed us in terms of any of our history, you'll know that we really have created an incredible jump in quality with regard to our virtual aspects, and all of these people help us with the virtual aspects of our program. Many times we have over 200 people listening in on the phone from all over the country and some international people. So we really appreciate all the efforts that people go to make this possible for listeners all over the world. So in terms of today, let's talk about what's happening. Our title is How Do You Make Decisions? And as conflict management professionals, that's something we care about. We want to know how people are sorting things out in their mind and coming to decisions that are right for them and possibly a win-win solution for them and whoever they're in conflict with. So Mary Atwater is our speaker today. We're very, very lucky to have her. She is the founder of Collaborative Mediation Services. She's a licensed psychologist and divorce mediator. She has a private practice in Potomac and Bethesda. In terms of her background, she has a BS in biology from Colorado State University, and she has a BA with honors in psychology from the University of Colorado at Boulder. She obtained her PsyD in clinical psychology from the University of Denver. Mary enjoys helping her clients to think flexibly, and I'm sure she'll share all of that with us, and strive toward emotional agility, again, another concept or phrase that we'd like to know more about. And she helps her clients move toward psychological health and more beneficial relationships. So with that, I'll turn things over to Mary. Thank you, Mary.
Great. Thank you, Cindy. I hope this is working okay. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I thank you, Cindy, for plucking me out of many mediator topics that were just given at the Maryland Mediators Conference in October.
So is the mic working? Let's just double check on that. Can you hear okay? Are people hearing okay out in the back?
All right? Do I have power to turn it up, or I just need to talk down or move it up, maybe? Move it up? I have a booming voice. I'm a little worried about booming. So thank you all for coming, and thank you again for the opportunity. I'm very excited. I did get a lot of help from all the people that Cynthia just talked about. Pamela helped me walk around the room last week so I'd know where I was presenting and, facilitate stuff to make sure that I was going to be able to give what I needed to give. So thanks for coming. I have power to move this, right? Okay. So welcome. And just a little bit about why I'm here is I really love talking about this topic of mediation. As a clinical psychologist, I've worked with families and children and couples for years now, and it's a mediation process. It might be family therapy, which I'm well trained in, but it's people interpersonal communication training, just trying to get everybody to talk about what they need in a non-conflictual way. So I'm excited to be here and share some of the tools that I use in my practice. I'm going to assume that many of you are mediators, and I'm not here to teach anyone how to mediate, but I do have some different tricks and tools, basically some maybe new language to give you, some new perspectives and tools that I hope will be useful for you. And as you're listening to them, they may make sense or may not make sense, but if you go out and use them, they'll make even more sense. Because as a cognitive psychologist, I really believe that it's in the doing that we learn, not in the thinking, because thinking can take us all kinds of directions. But if it's okay to ask, can anyone here say what they came here hoping to, one thing that they hope that they'll take away from today? So I feel like I'm clued into maybe people's expectations in the room. Anybody want to shout out, I'm here because I'd like...
Later in life decisions of which direction.
We absolutely need a mic for people.
Oh,
on the
okay.
phone. They will not hear you.
No problem.
Helping with later in life decisions, where to go, what to do, move, retire, whatever.
Okay.
What to do with your life.
All right. So big decision, major decisions. Anyone else have a thought of struggle that you're having in your own practice or your own relationships? It's kind of putting you on the spot here, but I'm welcome to hear anybody's request for.
It's wonderful to have you here, and I love what you just said about getting parties out of the thinking and into the doing, because I think at the table we do a lot of thinking and we do a lot of talking, and the real question is, how do we get them to implement and to actually do what it is that they're agreeing that they think they want to do? So I'm excited to hear more about that.
Okay, that sounds great.
I'll also add to that we find that when people are in conflict, they don't do their best thinking.
Yes.
And so we're hoping that we can maybe get some tips from you about how to move people to a place where they can do good decision making.
Great. I hope that I fulfill that need. We'll see how as we go. You all have to keep me honest. Just 2 housekeeping notes. I'm going to ask Lee to queue up 2 YouTube videos. So if you're on WebEx or something, you might want to know what the addresses are so you can already upload them so you're ready, or they still make sense after. So watch them. They're funny, they're entertaining, and I think they do a good job of describing some of the concepts that I'd like to introduce you to today. Conflict requires positions. We know that as mediators, they're not coming in because they're getting along, they're coming in because they're having some differences of opinion. It's different in the divorce world. There's sort of an adversarial component to getting a divorce. But in mediation, we have the benefit of really sitting down and having some good discussions about what people are thinking, how they're feeling, why they feel that way. It's a lovely process, mediation. And again, as mediators, some of our goals is to view them as differences, not as right or wrong, but also work for a desired outcome that's hopefully more win-win. One of the ways I love to start my mediation practice is to have people sit down and just kind of come up with what's the outcome that you're looking for today. Set some kind of goal, future goal that we might be working towards. If they want office harmony or they want better co-parenting relationships, and I can get them to state that at the beginning, then we kind of use that as a cue for, remember, we're working towards this way. It really pulls people back in and has them at the table as opposed to kind of leaving the room or going off on tangents. No problem. Developing a desired direction is an important part, I believe, of mediation. When I say values, I just want to check in with people because values can have all kinds of connotations. In the work that I do as a psychologist, my training is in cognitive behavioral, but it's also in something called ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. And our goal is to help our clients be more psychologically flexible rather than rigid and entrenched. So we talk often about values. So for instance, if a client said that they were looking to be healthier, to make healthier choices, we would talk about that as the way to be. You're always working towards being healthy. It's not a goal you get, it's a value you aspire to. But in between getting there is also the goals that it might take. Eating better, sleeping more, going to see a nutritionist. Those are all the goals towards the value of being a healthier person, whatever that looks like. So that's what I mean when I say values. I've given this talk many times, flexibility in mediation, neuroeconomics in mediation. So just quickly or briefly, neuroeconomics is an interdisciplinary field that seeks to explain human decision-making. Ah, perfect. It's a combination of neuroscience, behavioral economics, and cognitive psychology. So 3 of my favorite things, and we will touch on them throughout this talk. And I will also be bringing these concepts into something called the ladder of inference. We will be spending a lot of time integrating the material into this ladder of inference, and I'll go more into this in a minute. But it is a decision-making model, so it could be a very useful tool for you to use in your personal life or in your practice. Ladder of inference, perfect, okay. I don't know how I came about this. My daughter was helping me try to put together a PowerPoint. She's fantastic at it. And she introduced this concept to me, and I thought, well, this is a great visual aid, helping to describe how 2 people might not agree, how they might get into conflict, and how they make decisions. So at the bottom of the ladder of inference is data that's available to many of us, like in this room. The data that we might all see together is the colors of the chairs, the color of the rugs, the walls, the lights. There's a different perspective. My perspective is going this way, so I might gather data differently than you would facing this direction. So perceptual is part of the data. The way that we select the data, I could select the data and say people aren't paying attention, they're on their computers, they're on their handheld, so I'm selecting the data that says maybe people don't want to really be here. I could select that data if I wanted. I would be making some assumptions that I'm not the best speaker in the world, so this is going to go wrong or not in my favor. Come to a conclusion that maybe I shouldn't be doing public speaking. I could come up with a belief that there's a better use of my time, or I've bored you and I'm just not, I'm not very good at this. And so my action might be to not ever give a public speaking gig again. But that's just a short little fly up the ladder that all of us can do. So the power of this ladder will become evident as we talk. My good friend Lee here is going to cue up a YouTube video that explains it even more in depth than I just did, so I hope you enjoy it.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
More? I'm not getting sound. It's just playing through the laptop. We're on. It's only playing sound through the laptop.
Just give us a minute as we sort this out.
Just hand me a mic.
Hello.
Hello, and welcome. This is a short informational video about a topic that I'm very passionate about. If you like learning about communication and interpersonal relationships, I think you will find it useful. This video is being created as part of a class in the Provincial Instructor Diploma Program offered through Vancouver Community College. We all make assumptions on a fairly regular basis. It is part of how we operate in the world. Assumptions are based on our ability to infer. We see, hear, or smell something, and then draw a conclusion about it. And lots of times, our assumptions are correct. But as you probably know, sometimes our inferences lead us to make assumptions that are incorrect. And these can be dangerous for interpersonal relationships. Chris Argalis came up with what I think is a super useful metaphor for explaining how it is that we make assumptions. He called it the ladder of inference. The ladder has 6 rungs on it, and as you take in information, you climb the ladder. The first rung is observable data. So this is the stuff that you see, hear, smell, and notice about your surroundings. For example, let's pretend you're in a staff meeting and you notice that one of your employees, George, is staring off into another room when you're presenting new ideas. So you move up the ladder to the second rung, which is the selected data. So you can't take in all the data that you observe, so instead you make selections. So in our example, you come away from the meeting only remembering that George wasn't paying attention, and you miss the fact that he stuck around after the meeting to chat with his colleagues about the new ideas presented. This causes you to make assumptions. You start to add meaning to what you have observed. So you may start to think that George isn't interested in new ideas, and he's bored of his job. These kinds of assumptions we make all the time without even noticing. We can be 3 steps up the ladder and don't even notice that we're climbing. As we continue up the ladder, we start to draw conclusions. We might put a couple of different assumptions together and decide that from what we've noticed of George, he thinks that we're underqualified for a job and he wishes that he had got the promotion instead. You decide he's probably disengaged from work. Now we start to get into a dangerous area where we start to adopt beliefs about what's going on. Beliefs are the things we think about, so we might take our conclusions and turn them into beliefs. This might make us start to believe that George doesn't even like our ideas, and that he thinks we are incompetent. You might start to believe that George is jealous of you. One of the problems with beliefs that are founded in assumptions is that they will change how we select our data. It's a cycle, like the red arrow is showing. Because we believe George is not interested, we start to only notice times when he's not actively engaged in our ideas. We ignore the other data and continue to climb our ladder. And we can go higher up on our ladder than just having beliefs. We move into the realm of taking action. So because we believe that George doesn't like our ideas, we stop sharing with him and asking him for input. When we get this high up the ladder, it's hard to see the ground and remember where we came from. We might not even remember what facts caused us to come to the beliefs that we have. Taking action can also become a bit of a cycle, where we act in a certain way that creates situations to observe more data that reinforces our belief. So because we believed that George is disinterested, we stopped giving him opportunities to contribute, and thus we find more opportunities where he seems disengaged. Now, we've created a pretty strong opinion of our employee based on very little facts. So, what is important is learning how to climb back down the ladder. And there are a few ways to do this, and both involve recognizing the fact that we've climbed our ladder and made all these assumptions. Self-awareness is key. When you start to notice yourself climbing the ladder and making assumptions, you can ask yourself a simple question. What else could be going on? So, when I'm thinking about George, I think, well, maybe he's the kind of person who has a hard time focusing on presentations. Or maybe he had a really late night last night and is trying his hardest just to stay awake. The other important thing to do is check in with the other person. This isn't always easy, and it isn't always appropriate. However, when I start to notice myself making assumptions, I think it's only fair to let the other person know what's going on for me. Good communication solves so many problems. So I might ask George how he's doing, or what he thought of the ideas presented. If this is a frequent occurrence, I might be a bit more direct and let him know what I observed. The important part is to start with my observations and not my assumptions. If I tell George that he seems bored or not interested in new ideas, he's likely to get defensive. But if I let George know that I'm curious as to how he found the presentation, he's more likely to share what's really going on. Of course, I also need to be open to his feedback. If he was bored, I need to be okay with that answer. The idea is to start making your ladder more visible to the other person. I like to think of each person in a relationship as an iceberg. So the behaviors that we see is only a fraction of what's actually going on for that person. They may be having a bad day, or might have a totally different style than we are used to. At the same time, they can only see the tip of our iceberg. It's only when we inquire that we find out more details about what's really going on for another person. And remember, you may be climbing your ladder, and they may be climbing theirs. The importance is to be aware of your ladder and how you got to where you did. And more importantly, what you need to do to get down the ladder to where you can have meaningful conversations that are based on truths and facts, rather than operating on your assumptions. I know that this was a really quick introduction to a kind of complicated idea,
That's good.
but I hope that others can reflect on this.
So I
and
hope
think
you were
about
able
how
to
it can
hear
be
that.
useful
Did
as they move
anybody,
forward in their conversations and
do the
interpersonal.
concepts make sense? Is this something new, or you're familiar with it? And it's part of management training. It's part of good communication training. I think it's part of good mediation training is to really recognize that people are in different places. That's not bad or good. It's just different. And the more that we can hang down here at the bottom and collect data without jumping to conclusions or assuming stuff, we have better communication. We're able to hear and listen and understand the other person. Another video that I hope we can use, I don't know if it's able to tap it into a different, there's no way to put it into the bigger system? Because I know,
Not in time.
okay. Well, it might be hard.
Mute their computer locally on the webinar.
I'm sorry?
You ask them to mute their computer on the webinar because they're going to hear it through their telephone. Please mute their computer. For the online audience, we're going to play a video. Please mute your computer locally. You will hear the audio come through your telephone.
Okay, so let me set up this next rather short YouTube, but it's fascinating. It's and entertaining. I was trying to entertain you all. So I don't know if anyone's read the book Thinking Fast and Slow. Anyone? I'm on my second or third read. It's a fascinating book, and it talks about decision making. Daniel Kahneman, in his book, describes that we have information processing is very important consideration, can be an obstacle to decision making. System 1 is an automatic and quick. We don't think about it. We need to move quickly sometimes, so we really don't want to overthink or second guess. So that's our System 1, information processing. The second system is more effortful. It takes attention and time. It's more about math and really trying to weigh the pros and cons of risks. And then the third amazing idea that he had that's salient to the work that we do is a concept called priming. Priming, if you set it up that this is going to be a great day or we're going to get some work done, if you're positive, you're creating the sense that things will go well. And you can also prime for the negative. You can look outside and see that it's raining and start thinking this is going to be a pretty awful day. You've really primed your mind for the rest of the day. So priming is a very important psychological principle. And so I hope this short video is fun and entertaining for you as well.
You may not realize it, but your brain actually processes information in two very distinct ways. Like when you look at this photo, you instantly know she has blonde hair, is visibly angry, and likely has some choice words to yell. Without any effort, you experienced fast thinking. But if you look at the following problem, something different happens. Sure, you immediately know it's a multiplication problem, and you knew you could solve it if you had the energy, but didn't. If you do try, your muscles will tense, your pupils will dilate, and your heart rate will increase. Now, you've experienced slow thinking. These two systems of fast and slow thinking dictate much of our perception and reaction in life. Take these lines, for example. It's clear that they're different lengths, but if you measure them, they're actually the exact same length. Even now that you know, System 1, or your fast thinking, can't stop seeing the illusion because it acts automatically. A similar effect is seen here. Which figure is the largest? Again, they're all the same size, but the suggestion of perspective and depth causes your System 1 to interpret the picture as three-dimensional, even though it's on a flat two-dimensional surface. It's making quick work of the available information, and so your conscious System 2, or slow thinking, must compensate after the fact and choose not to believe your intuition or instinct. Want to see your System 2 in action? I'll show you a string of 4 digits, you read them aloud, then add 1 to each of the original digits. If the card reads 3795, the correct response would be 4806. We'll then go to the next card and you'll do the same, followed by the next card. Ready? Go. Few people can cope with more than 4 digits, but even harder is add 3. The interesting bit is that though your pupils would have dilated, you often become effectively blind when you fully engage System 2. Did you notice the color of the text change? Or how about the fact that the numbers completely changed when I put them off to the side? Listen to the following puzzle. A bat and a ball cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Chances are your System 1 intuition was yelling 10 cents, but this appealing System 1 answer we know is wrong. In fact, the correct answer is 5 cents. Even if you worked out the correct answer, you likely thought of 10 cents along the way. System 1 is trying to work out an answer as quickly and seamlessly as possible, which is extremely beneficial in everyday life. If every activity required full mental effort, it would be exhausting. But knowing this allows us to understand that not all of our first impressions are correct. How many animals of each kind did Moses take into the ark? So few people detect what is wrong with this question that it's been dubbed the Moses illusion. In fact, Moses took no animals, Noah did. Again, our brain invests as little resources as necessary so that things run quickly and smoothly. Because Moses is not abnormal in the biblical context, System 1 unconsciously detects an association between Moses and ark and quickly accepts the question. In a similar way, System 1 generates context without you knowing. Reading each of the following may seem fairly simple. A, B, C, Anne approached the bank, and 12, 13, 14. But your brain actually interpreted these ambiguous statements without you ever knowing. You could have read it as A, 13C, or 12, B, 14, but your brain created the context unconsciously. Also, you likely imagined a woman with money on her mind walking towards a building with tellers, but if the sentence before this was, they were floating gently down the river, the entire scene would have changed because bank is no longer associated with money. Without an explicit context, System 1 quickly generates one based on previous experience. In this case, you've likely visited more banks than rivers, and so the context is resolved accordingly. This ties into a concept called priming. For example, if I said wash, how would you complete this word fragment? Most would see soap, but had I just shown you the word eat, you'd be more likely to see soup. In this way, both eat and wash prime your thoughts. Though System 2 likes to think that it's in charge and knows what's going on, the truth is that priming effects have even been shown to affect and modify behavior. These arise in System 1, and you have no conscious access to them. If you'd like to learn more about the thinking systems in your brain,
Okay, I
check
hope
out
that
the book
hope
Thinking
people could
Fast
hear
Slow by
and
David
gather
Allen.
the way our amazing minds can trick us into seeing things that aren't there, or put things together that we didn't even have planned for it to do. It's another concept is called automaticity. Our language is so associative that if I said to you, Mary had a little, your mind would fill in. Exactly. So it could have been a little pair of shoes or a little dog, but we get really kind of stuck in our thinking, and it just sort of takes us away. We don't really argue, but sometimes when we're making decisions, it would be good to check the facts or wonder why you picked that over this. So differences don't have to be a battle. They can just be, oh, I heard it this way, or my mind went there. And it's a great way to discuss, how we get to conclusions, beliefs, and actions by spending a little bit more time carefully considering the data and how we selected, and maybe the reasons why we selected that data. So I thought Kahneman's this little brain trick thing would help you understand how easy it is for the mind to fill in blanks and how automatic some things are. And it's not that that's a bad or a good, but we should be aware of it if we're going to try and help people, come to a decision, resolve a conflict. So I'm going to talk a little bit more of brain, just the setup of the lovely brain that we got and how old it is and how sometimes it doesn't work well. The structure is a setup for us. It's an obstacle. Our emotional memories can be an obstacle to good thinking. The chemistry of our brain can be an obstacle to good thinking. The quality of our thoughts, whether they're flexible or inflexible, kind of black and white versus open for interpretation. And then also some cognitive biases and a little bit of behavioral neuroeconomics and their fallacies, how easy it is for our minds to kind of go along with what we perceive, even though we just realize it might not be true. So here's a slide, a slice through the brain. The most important, I don't know if I have a thing here or not, but the most important parts are this emotional part of the brain right here and the thinking part of the brain right here. Everyone knows that the emotional, or this part of the brain, is the oldest piece of our hardware. It's been around a very long time, and it's very useful, but it can also get us into trouble in this modern day when there are not tigers and lions and things coming after us. We might react, but we're really not in danger. We just have this heightened alarm system. And the thinking part of the brain is the brand new part, the prefrontal cortex. It plans, it gathers data, it adds, subtracts, it weighs risks. It plans and executes. So just off the top of your head, which part of the brain do we want our clients to be in when they come into the room to do some kind of mediation with us? Just seeing if you're all awake. Go ahead, if you can shout it out, or... Sorry? The thinking part. And so do you see that sometimes you've got someone who's already got their thinking cap on, the other one's kind of stuck in that emotional part of their brain? It's very frustrating. Another thing that's recent in the research, I hope this works, is now we know why that might be. So it kind of helps explain or normalize that when we're fearing loss, when we're fearing that it's not going to be fair or just, our minds really do kick in. It's just this emotional part of the brain. It's an evolutionary survival part. We think we're going to lose or be hurt or even emotionally harmed, not just physically harmed. And so there's a super highway, just direct neuronal activity that goes right to the newest part of the brain. And the newest part of the brain's not very developed, so it pretty much takes commands. Boy, this part's lit up, the thinking part shuts down. They don't really work in concert very well. We can improve on that as human beings, as thinking people. But it doesn't want to second guess the old part of the brain that really tells you you're in danger, you should run away, or you should fight. But another interesting finding, if this works, I'm not sure where I'm supposed to point. Oops. Okay. There we go. That's good. I wanted those little red dots. Perfect. Okay, so while there may be a superhighway that goes from the emotional part of the brain to the thinking part, there's really not that great of neuronal connections back from the thinking to the emotional part. They're just like little backcountry roads. So we can reinforce this over time. We can get very strong. We can try to have our thinking part of our brain really start to prepare. You're going to go in for an emotional argument, you're going to breathe, you're going to have a picture of your children or a sunset or something. There's ways that we can calm ourselves, but it takes a lot more effort and a lot more energy to help calm down the emotional part of the brain. So in mediation, I work at the circuit court. I do 3-hour mediations for parents and parenting plan. We take a break. We go get some water, we take a little walk, we might caucus. We're just sort of trying to help everyone show up with the best parts so that they can stand up for themselves and represent themselves in the mediation process. Do you have a question? No? Okay. Anybody? Here's another slice, MRI slice. The blue part is non-active, and the yellow and orange is active. So if we have a sad, depressed client, for whatever reason, there's not much thinking going on here. There's just, nobody's really home, or they're pretty shut down. They're just kind of trapped in their thinking. Whereas someone who's not depressed and has plenty of the chemistry that they need, you can see that they're working and they're ready, and that's who we want to show up for themselves so that they make good decisions. It doesn't work when one of them is not and one of them is. It's not really a good mediation scenario.
Could you restate the question?
Yes, Sir mentioned that in divorce work, people come in highly emotive. They are affected by great loss and probably grief too. So litigation doesn't make room for that. But in my experience now, after doing this for 9 years, collaborative law and mediation, they make room for the differences. No one's trying to railroad anyone. People are trying to take their time. We might postpone a meeting. We might help, a coach might help a client, either seek out therapy or medication or take a vacation, something so that when they come back to the process to make these very, very important decisions, they are well represented. They themselves are well represented. So yeah, you're right, a lot of that shows up. I've heard some good stories about, the type of mediation that you all have to do, the counseling, the, helping people adjust to maybe something new, a new transition or what's going on. Anytime there's something new in a transition, many of our clients are going to be a little bit lit up, or in this case, shut down. I like to think of, this is the quality of our thoughts too. Inflexible versus flexible. And if you will follow me, I'd like to try a little experiment. I'd like you to put out your hand. And I'd like you to squeeze your hand to a tight fist. And even though you think it's tight, I want you to really make it tight. I want you to look at it. You can see your knuckles go white. Some of the blood's just kind of coming out. And you look at the utility of this fist. Anybody have any observations of the utility of the fist? Angry, aggression, punch someone, power over. It's a weapon. I think inflexible thinking is restricted, just like this. It's just, there's nothing really you can do with the fist except for get angry and use it against someone. Okay, now you can let go. Feels pretty good. You feel the blood come back into your hand and maybe down your arm, and all of a sudden it's open. It's lighter. You have opportunities to shake a hand or, rub your eyebrow or give yourself a little hug or hug someone or touch someone in a very peaceful, loving kind of a way. So for me, flexible thinking is the goal, not only in my psychology practice, but also in my mediation practice. It's not a bad thing when somebody's inflexible, but I try to help them walk towards a more flexible thought. And sometimes this follows right in here. I know that you picked that data and you selected that data. I'm curious about that. I'm wondering how you missed this piece of data or something like that. So it's just really kind of coaxing them into, you can have that thought, or you could try another thought that might be a little bit more flexible and keep you at the table and keep the negotiation going. Does this make sense? Here's some cognitive psychologists love to use the little thought bubbles over the head. So here's a person with some thought bubbles. And as you can see, there's a quality of, there's quality to this. I'm so hurt, someone has to pay, I'll never be respected here again, I'll get even, I won't let them win, I'll never live this down. They're kind of fatalistic, they're blaming, get even. There's also some victim stuff going on here. So these are, you can just almost cue this up in your head of like, oh, here comes the inflexible thoughts. And just note it. It's not a bad or a good thing, but you can recognize that this client is a bit stuck. Here's my, I love this little person stuck in the middle, hand in the head. You can just see how immobilized and inflexible a person can get. It makes me sad, and I think we need to help them find direction. I like to remind my clients about the value statement that they had at the very beginning so that they can kind of maybe join us and get on board knowing that there's some steps that they could take towards the resolution that they were looking for, the outcome that they were looking for. Flexible thinking, in contrast to inflexible thinking, is open and willing to other possibilities, considering other data, selecting something in concert with the other person. Different perspectives, absolutely. And the other quality of flexible thinking for me, as I teach my clients, is to be here and now. Flexible is here now. It's not in the past, there then, when something bad may have happened or misperceived. It's not in the future, what if, of catastrophe and this isn't going to work out. The mindset, the quality of the mindset is here now. What can we do? What would it look like if things were going well, if you were getting your needs met? Does people use this kind of language in your mediation when you're working with clients? To try to get them present here, what can we do today? As opposed to one more time the story of what happened over, just kind of traps them in ideas that there's no way out, or their fears of the future that could be catastrophizing and not really useful, because it's hard to work with something that's not here right now. I always like this thought when my clients are stuck in the past. I say something like, if the past was a stock, would you invest in it? And many of them kind of go, oh, okay, I guess that's what I'm doing. And people say you're looking in the mirror as opposed to looking forward. You're just kind of stuck and immobilized like that little dude. Here's a visual that I like of flexible. You are riding a wave, and it looks pretty good. It takes adjustments. If you've ever surfed or body surfed, you in order to not crash with the wave, you have to maneuver yourself. You have to be prepared for making some adjustments. These are concepts and visuals, I think, that serve the mediation process well. Again, it's moving forward, it's moving towards your goal, it's being present, being your own agent. Does everybody like this little slide? Can you feel the motion or the forward motion? Here again, we got some thought bubbles, just some examples for people to be able to recognize. Flexible thinking looks like, I will help my workmate, coworker be the best coworker they can be. You can get them there, that's pretty good. This is not really worth being upset about. This won't be as bad as my mind keeps telling me. The way other people do things is okay, and it might teach me something. These are open, willing people that are comments, qualities of thoughts that can really help with the ladder of inference, the decision-making process. So I'm going to talk more about cognitive biases and the fallacies that have come that inform this process of making decisions. I've got another exercise for you. It's a mind-watching exercise, and I need you to do, if you can, just kind of be comfortable in your seat. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. So I want you to feel safe. Look around, you're safe. Everything's safe. If you're driving, please don't try this, or if you're operating heavy machinery, don't try this. I need you to just really focus and be here and now. What I usually ask my clients to do is both feet on the ground so you feel grounded. Hands in your lap or on your feet, just sort of let go of electronic information. And you might have to wiggle a little bit. Just get set in your seat, erect and open and willing. And when you're ready, close your eyes. I will too. Take a nice deep breath. Let it out. Be here. Be curious. And again, I want you to hold out your hand, and this time I want your palm up. And I'd like you to imagine that I'm putting a nice, ripe Georgia peach in your hand. If once I've placed the peach in your hand, can you feel the little fuzzy part to a peach? And now gently move the peach up to your nose and smell this ripe peach. And maybe your nose gets a little bit of fuzzy part too. And go ahead and take a little bite of the peach and taste that, burst of peach juice. Juice that could be rolling down your chin right now or rolling down your hand and arm. And you might even remember when the last time was you ate a peach or the first time you ate a peach. Your mind can take you places. Emotional memory is very powerful. So when you're ready and you've eaten your peach, you can open your eyes again. What did people experience? Come on, brave souls. Calm, that sounds nice. When you're here and now, you feel pretty calm. Anyone else? Did everyone taste the peach? Okay, I should say, who tasted the peach? Okay, some of you, that's great. Go ahead.
It was summertime.
Ah,
It was warm. I was with my family. We were peach picking. It was a good day.
that's great. That's great. So how is it that our minds can take us somewhere and it's really not here? I mean, this was our mind making stuff up, but it made itself up from a history, from our culture, from our experiences. These are data points. Our minds are really amazing. They can imagine stuff. They can imagine good. They can imagine evil. Our minds are really, really powerful. And that's interesting, and it can be useful, especially when we're trying to help people get out of a locked position and join us in another position. Our minds can take us to the worst, the best, what's possible, what's probable. This is a concept that I learned at NIMH. They were doing a research project where they would place the research subjects in front of a screen. This is a screen, four pictures in 4 quadrants. Upper right quadrant is ice cream cone, something that we're all going to be eating more of now that it's a little summery outside. Upper left is a dog that looks a little bit like our beagle we have. Bottom left is a happy child hugging a parent. And you can just see that they're feeling pretty good. You can imagine that too. And then the bottom right is a child crying. I'm thinking like 18 months. I don't know if there's other moms in the room, but that seems like 18, kind of not really able to verbalize, but still crying. Does anybody get any nerve response? As a mom, I get a visceral reaction to both these, the happy child and the sad child. So I want you all to stare at that. If you can see it, I worry that you can see. Can you see the pictures in the back row? Okay, good. So everyone sort of look at that for a little bit. And I want, and again, another brave soul to come up and say, what do you see? Where did your mind go when you look at these? I'm not telling you the answers until somebody helps.
It went away from whatever else we were thinking there.
Okay.
I just totally got distracted and went away from whatever else I was thinking about.
Okay, that's
To
interesting.
something else.
Anybody focus in on the ice cream cone? All right, baseball, ice cream, popcorn. Anybody focus in on the dog? Anyone focus in on the happy kid? And how many of you focused in on the crying child? Okay. So out of these 4 pictures, one is significantly negative. It kind of draws people in. So at NIMH, they noticed that people who have the tendency to be a little depressed or a little bit anxious, they really focused in, and this is amazing because they actually watch where your eye goes in a screen. I don't know if you've seen that before, but it's pretty cool. They could tell how many people were looking exclusively at this picture at the exclusion of the other 3, and the measures matched that correlated with anxiety and depression indicators. So guess what the treatment protocol is? Come on, you're all smart people.
Look at happy pictures.
Focused on, so they rewarded the research subjects to look at the positive, not to negate the negative, but to also look around and see what else is possible. When I work with people who are really entrenched and stuck, I tried this exercise. I thought I might try it. Anybody shout out something in your job as a mediator that gets your client stuck? A thought, a visual, Anything come to mind? I've been wronged. Wronged. Okay, good. I was going to say, that's not fair. That's wrong. Okay. So, that's wrong is a thought. And so what I have my clients do is I have them grab a hold and put it up here. That's wrong. Not fair. And while they're focused in on that thought, what else is happening? Focus in, obsessively looking at that's wrong, trapped in that thought. I ask them to put it back a little bit. And so that's wrong is still there, but what else is also true? What else can you see now that it's not here and predominantly taking over your mind space? Okay, I can see the wall, the blue, I see Pam smiling. I have more to look at. I can start seeing other possibilities. And if I can get them to take their hand off and even more dramatically to put that thought there, it's there, it didn't go away. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm not saying that their thought that something's wrong is not important. I'm just making it be one thing that's important, because now what can they do when that thought isn't consuming them? They have so much more ability to do something and maybe to impact or affect what's wrong. So taking them out of the thought and kind of circling the drain of that's wrong, that's one way to do something. But another way is to kind of note it and give it some room and then start to think, what are the possibilities? So it's just a little interaction of helping people step away from what they're entrenched or trapped in. This is a great quote. I don't know if any of you know who Eckhart Tolle is, but he seems to be a very wise man. And this is a pretty wise statement. When our clients are trapped in the future of what if, this is what he says: unease, anxiety, tension, stress, and worry are all forms of fear and are caused by too much future and not enough presence. It's very powerful to help our clients really sit and accept what is in kind of a Buddhist way, and I'm a pretty Buddhist psychologist myself, is to not be there wanting it to be different or not be trapped in the past, immobilized, but to try and be here with that's wrong, and then kind of develop options around that. Does this make sense? They're stuck in the past. As we said before, the investment of they're just investing that when they could be investing in the here now. This is a pretty interesting comment too. You can't start the next chapter of your life if you just keep rereading the last one. Isn't that frustrating when you're reading a book and you have to just keep rereading that one paragraph because you're tired and you have to go back and reread it? So getting stuck doesn't advance the ball. It doesn't advance your needs or your ability to impact what you'd like to have the outcome be. Our minds and our thoughts can keep us trapped in the past, like some story. This is another thing I ask. What story is so amazingly powerful that it's got you stuck there? And is being there really where you want to be? What would it look like if you weren't stuck in that past and you could move towards here now and show up for yourself and describe your needs and ask for something different to happen? It feels empowering to help people move out of stuck and move into here now. Okay, so we've covered some of the reasons why the brain and the chemistry and emotional memory can mess up our decision making. We've covered how our mind can trick us, the processing speed. And so the behavioral economics people came up with some pretty interesting reasons why we get stuck and it's hard to make a decision. So as I said before, Daniel Kahneman, and I think I have the other gentleman's name, in 2002, they won the Nobel Prize in economics as psychologist, amazing. Nobel Prize in economics for prospect theory. Anybody in the room know this? What this theory is? Okay, so if I mess it up, will you help me? I'm going to try and keep it really, really simple. I just thought it was amazing. So if you see, there's the values, increased value, decreased value. Horizontally, there's losses to the left and gains to the right. And if you know anything about just a chart in general or signage or kind of predicting statistically, you would predict this. You would predict that as the gains increases, the value increases. They go together. This is satisfaction, how people feel when the value increases and they're feeling that they've gained. It's an emotional response to winning. It's an emotional response to getting what you want. And so the emotional response or satisfaction level of people who lose, you could hypothesize that it would be the same, that it should go kind of, that's statistics, right? If it was equal, but it's not. We feel so much more, 2.5 times more profoundly about losing than we do winning. Loss is just that much more like wrenching, hurtful. And our clients get stuck in that. When they're the leave-e, they're the person that's getting dumped, or the person that didn't get the job or has to change or move. The person that feels like they're the loser feels it more deeply. And so we need to pay attention to that. It's really important information. Sir, did you have a question? Okay. Does this make sense to you all? Did you expect this outcome? Pretty amazing. In the work I do, mediating parenting plans and helping parents be good co-parents during and after divorce, I've watched a few litigated, and I know of plenty of litigated cases, and I've seen plenty of children whose parents have divorced, so much so that I rarely see children whose parents have divorced because I'd rather work with the parents. It can have a bigger impact on their co-parenting, their relationship, which really helps any child that's parents have gone through divorce. The way that their parents communicate. It's just a much better bang for the buck. But what I also notice, and this comes to my mind, is this is the area that people take advantage of, that some litigators that I don't work with take advantage of, this state of profound sadness, loss, and grief, to move things fast, to zip things, to overload. It's not a collaborative way to get a divorce. These attorneys are going after, trying to win, and make the other person a loser. And the beautiful thing about mediation and collaborative law is we take our time. We understand that there's a grieving process. We understand that we want both people to be prepared to, discuss and generate options and select and decide with, well represented themselves, not the lawyers, but just themselves well represented, which I think is really the gist of mediation. You want both people to feel that they have the same kind of power in the room. No one's powering over them. There I go, editorializing. Another thing we human beings are not very good at is assessing probability. 100% is going to happen down to not going to happen. Somewhere in the middle, as we all know, is probably 50% chance, 25% chance. My clients, I've noticed, really get stuck on the 5 or 10% chance something's going to happen, and then they rally around that as if it's a certainty. It's kind of mind-boggling. But we do this, especially around fear. Fear that dad can't take care of the children as well as they can. It could be a control employee with control issues, that they need to do everything because they have a fear that no one can do it as well as they can do it. We just get trapped in this very minor probability of 5 or 10%. Does anyone had this experience with your clients before, where they're really betting on the smallest lowest common denominators as opposed to kind of understanding that 90% of that may not happen. I think I'd rather bet on the 90% that it may not happen than the 10%, but we're bad at betting. We tend to overvaluate, underevaluate. When people in general just underestimate stuff, it can be around different things. Does anybody have, I hope I'm speaking clearly enough, does anyone have a idea or can share an episode that they've run into where their clients are over or underestimating something that we'd be able to kind of discuss? Do you agree that your clients do this? Yes. I don't want to do all the talking.
In most of the court mediation that I have done, almost invariably, the lawyers advise their clients, you have a good chance of winning.
Chance.
And I remember one very uncomfortable situation, uncomfortable for me, was that in an advanced conversation with the lawyer, he said, I've been telling my client that, and he doesn't believe me. Maybe if he hears from you, he won't be so stuck on this idea that he's going to win. So we got into a mediation session, and I began to hint that he wasn't likely to win before a judge. He turns to the lawyer and says, what do you think? The lawyer says, oh, I think you've got a great case.
That sounds pretty normal and unfortunate. Our clients don't have a great sense of probability or prediction, especially if they're in that loss piece. Their minds aren't working. They're in that emotional thing. There's more blue than yellow, so they can be easily swayed or easily maneuvered or manipulated. We underestimate, or we may even overestimate the time it takes to do a lot of things. How many people overestimate the time it would to cook a meal, go for a walk, exercise? We have an obesity problem in this nation. I think people get really stuck on if I don't have an hour to exercise, then forget it. You could exercise you could take a 5-minute walk, and maybe then you could add 5 more minutes to it to be healthy. You can do that for yourself. You can cook a simple meal. It doesn't have to be terribly elaborate. You don't need 5 courses. But our minds get really stuck what we can't do, and it's about under or overestimating. So I pulled up this thing from, I guess it's Center for Disease Control and Prevention and then National Transportation Safety Board. Threats, probabilities of things happening the way that we are not so great at predicting. So I'll go through a couple of these. What's more common in the U.S., suicide or homicide? Homicide? Actually, the answer is suicide. What's more frequent cause of death in the U.S., pool drowning or falling out of bed? Pool drowning. I thought they were going to say something else because I've heard other. That's okay. What are the top 5 causes of accidental death in the U.S. following motorcycle accidents? Drug overdose, fire, choking, falling downstairs, and bicycle accidents. Are those on your radar screen? What are the 2 causes of non-accidental death in America? Top 2 causes of accidental death in America. Cancer, heart disease. Actually, in order, stroke, respiratory disease, and diabetes. So sometimes facts are what they are, and then they change, and then so things move, and we get stuck in what we remembered our history telling us that it was. But anyways, there's a lot of, you just have to Google it. We are not so good at probability and prediction, and people take advantage of that. Endowment effect. How much is it worth? If we own it, it's worth a lot more. If we're trying to buy it, it's worth a lot less. That makes sense, right? How many people have try it for 30 days and you'll get your money back? Anybody in here done that? It's a pretty easy sales job. You really want a new couch, and they say try it, and you have 30 days to bring it back, and they'll just charge you the restocking fee or something. But because loss is so hard for us, this thing happens called an endowment effect and an ownership. We bring that couch home. It's ours. We're not taking it anywhere. It's really hard to, it's really hard for our minds to shift to probably more factual, rational information because we feel pretty good about owning and we feel pretty bad about losing. We really do. We become attached to what we own. So this is even, now I'm moving from the neuroeconomic to psychology. We all arrive by different streets. We all have different histories. We have different DNA. We have different culture. This impacts the data that we select from. So the experiences of, and I picked employee boss. Hope that was okay. They just probably had they have different boxes of experience. Those dictate what you select. Also, the other concept I like to use, it's psychological, the capacity. A best example I can give you, I could give you a lot of examples, but the best example I can give you is parents often overestimate the capacity of their children. And it's just sad. When kids are much younger, very smart people like my husband, who's got a PhD in analytical chemistry, he really assumes that the dog and small people understand what he's talking about. But they don't have a PhD. They haven't even gotten out of kindergarten yet. And dogs, we know, are like 3-year-olds. So really, you can only chastise them and they're still looking at you for the treat. They don't really care what they did wrong. So capacity, we overestimate capacity. In the work, does this make sense or salient? Anyone have an example?
I want to offer an example of the reverse.
Okay.
It seems to me that we hear and read a lot about students who fail in school because their teachers and their parents think they will and think they do not have the capacity to learn.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, so
Right.
there certainly is a movement in education in the opposite direction from what I think you're suggesting.
That's okay. The study that I'm thinking of is from the Center for the Prevention of Violence. I did some abstracting there at the University of Colorado Boulder. Number one reason for child abuse is high expectations by parents. They have an expectation that they should be able to, I don't know, do the chores, do the homework, walk the dog. Each child has a very different capacity. You can't say because I hear this way too much, your older brother, blah, 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 and then you've got this other kid who's barely holding it together and could never possibly be as an angel or angelic as their older, but that's that pressure to kind of have more capacity when they don't. So I do like helping parents get a handle on really what are you talking about. When you say responsibility, do you mean that they brush their teeth and they clean their clothes? I mean, just a conversation about capacity is very important in any relationship, but specifically in the mediation process. An example for couples and divorce is one parent might have the capacity for wanting several children and the other person has the capacity for loving and caring for one. And so that's their bandwidth. They're good at one-on-one relationships, but the other person wanted 2 or 3. The marriage dissolves. There's just not enough bandwidth or capacity to go around to maintain the marriage. And Sarah, this is another concept by that a psychological principle is that we get hooked by our thoughts. We get so hooked by them that we start to believe that they're true. And some of those can be very negative. This will never work out. Doesn't matter what we do. Very kind of down on yourself thinking. We think we have no options. Getting hooked means that you're stuck and you can't let go. And our minds do this so well. Acceptance is just a really hard principle to get with. It seems like you're giving up or something. But acceptance can also be, okay, I'm willing to accept that this is the situation, and now what do we do about it? So that's the difference. Acceptance as resignation, or acceptance is, okay, here's the story, here's the big picture, what is possible? How do we generate options? How do we increase the data pool so that we move up and make good decisions? I'd like to read you something about acceptance or about letting go. It's an excerpt from an excerpt. It's an excerpt from Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. And she quotes something from the novel by Tom Wolfe, The Right Stuff. In the 1950s, a few highly trained pilots in the U.S. Air Force were set on a life and death task to fly at altitudes higher than ever before attempted. Going beyond the Earth's denser atmosphere, they found, much to their horror, that the ordinary laws of aerodynamics no longer existed. As Tom Wolfe puts it in The Right Stuff, a plane could skid into a flat spin like a cereal bowl on a waxed Formica counter, and then start tumbling, not spinning and diving, but tumbling end over end. The first pilots to face this challenge responded by frantically trying to stabilize their planes, applying correction after correction. The more furiously that they manipulated the controls, the wilder the ride became. Screaming helplessly to ground control, "What do I do next?" they would plummet to their death. This tragic drama occurred several times until one pilot, Chuck Yeager, inadvertently struck upon a solution. When his plane was tumbling, Yeager was thrown violently around the cockpit and was knocked out. Unconscious, his plane plummeted towards Earth. Several miles later, the plane entered the Earth's denser atmosphere, where standard navigational controls and strategies could work again. Yeager came to, steadied the aircraft, and he landed safely. He had discovered the only life-saving response that was possible in this desperate situation. Don't do anything. Take your hands off the controls. And this is the solution, as Wolfe put it. This is the only choice he had to survive. But it countered all training and even basic survival instinct, but it worked. It didn't fit with the correct assumptions of what was supposed to happen. So when we feel trapped, when things aren't going our way, or we're hurt, or we're in pain, or hopeless, we really do react strongly to try and control, or we try to slip away and avoid. It's just, it's an animal thing. It's not a bad or a good. If we try to retreat, though, or if we try to take control, we don't usually get a good result from the relationships that we're in. The more we fear failure, more frantically we probably react. Our actions are frantic. It's hard to get needs met when you're desperate and trying to control. So what would it be like if you'd be willing to take your hands off the perceived controls? If you allowed yourself to pause and be in this moment instead of just reacting, responding. Pausing allows us to feel what is happening in the present moment, to allow the feelings to come and go, and sometimes to just kind of let this moment live through us. Being mindful in the moment allows us to proceed with options, to respond, and not just react. Taking our hands off the controls and pausing is an opportunity to clearly see the wants and the fears that are driving us. Letting go, interesting concept. So helping our clients move from stuck, inflexible, I believe my worried thoughts, will be the worst thing, it's not fair, it's wrong, moving towards flexible thinking of my mind is racing around with powerful emotions. That's true. How can I help calm my mind, those little backcountry roads? How can I take deep breaths, get some water, shake it off, get back into the thinking part of my brain? And also, how can I let go of this thought, and have another thought, a more workable thought? Here and now. Being here and now. It's pretty hard. It's pretty hard to accept. And back to the value direction. So at the beginning, I bring in the value direction. At the end, I bring in the value direction. Has anyone been here, Muir Woods? One of my favorite spots on the planet. Oh. So I'm doing this work. I'm a mediator. I've got clients that are high conflict, and there's a lot of emotions in the room. And as I'm walking down this path, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a perfect visual for the work that I want to prime my clients with, is that you are on a path together. And as you split and separate, it can be two peaceful paths, just like this, to kind of put that visual in their mind of, okay, we don't have to be at war, we don't have to hate each other, it doesn't have to be this awful divorce, it can be a compassionate divorce, it can be an amicable divorce. And once we get to acceptance, if we can get our clients there, the acceptance, and moving forward, they can start to enjoy, events. If there's conflict at work, you probably don't go to the, whatever parties that are going on, the picnics that are going on. You don't want to run into that person. So it becomes an avoidance issue as opposed to a resolved issue. So you miss out. You miss out on the culture of what could be a very, nice office harmony. It's possible, right? There's more good than bad in the offices that you guys work in, right? More good than bad. Well, that's something to strive for then. I know. So I'm former Air Force. I was in the Air Force. Worked for Jefferson County Schools after Columbine. I kind of know the Institute. So I know that your mind can say it's the crying kid in the corner. But don't forget that there's other good things that do happen too, and discount what's positive. If you want to chat afterwards, I'd be happy to.
We can talk offline, but just when you think of Congress, just think of what's happening at the highest level of government. So is it good or bad?
Yeah, isn't that a life story?
And from the highest level, it's kind of pushed down to the agency level. So,
Right.
So I don't know.
Okay. Cool. And we have limited control, so sometimes we only have control over what's just right around us. And by that, your mind can go to happy, peaceful. We are the engineers of our thoughts. As a cognitive scientist, I just said that. So this is a classic perception photos. Many people seen this elephant. Everyone here is blindfolded. And as they touch different parts of the elephant, they come up with different observations. Their data is they touch the tusk, it must be a spear. They're up in the top where the ears are flapping, and oh, it's a fan. And the tail, it's a rope. Everyone's perception is true and valid. It's what they're feeling. And I can't help but wonder if all of these people were able to articulate what they were seeing, if they could come together collaboratively and go, oh, it's an elephant. It would be a shared experience, right? seeing all sides from many perspectives is an important component to mediation and to decision making. This is one I use all the time with the couples that I work with. On the left-hand side, you see a guy or gal yelling at 4. He sees 4 logs, 2 by 2 by maybe 3 feet, I don't know. And then this person over here, if you joined them, you would see, well, there's 3 there. These are equally valid observations. So for me, what I try to do is try to get Mr. 4 to come over here and say, oh my gosh, it is 3. That's kind of not my experience, but I can see what you see. That's important. Looking through the other person's eyes to observe the data and how they selected that data, that's important. Has anyone else seen this before? It's pretty cool. It helps. It's a little tool you can have. So we're back to the ladder of inference. Actions that people take can be helpful, useful. Sometimes whipping up this ladder, just kind of go about what you need to do. You get in your car, you go through security, the badges, all that stuff's pretty routine, right? Pamela thought that I would be a little bit freaked out about it, but I'm like, I'm former Air Force. I'm so used to, I'll show everybody everything. Here's my blood, whatever. So the decision-making process here, if we can keep our clients moving down the ladder to gather more data, to check their assumptions, why did you make that conclusion that it's 4? And then you can see, now I can see why you made that conclusion. And it affects our beliefs, it affects our values, and also the action that we take. So I hope this model is useful. Anybody have any questions about it? Do you see how it could be useful either in your personal or in your work? Don't know about the federal government yet. The overall, I'll have to really think about that model in this decision making. Like, what do I decide? This seems to fit working in the federal government, right? Keep calm, look cool, look busy, and focus in on what you can do to, improve the situation rather than look for what you can't do, I would suggest. So I hope I gave you some new language, some new perspectives, hopefully some new tools. We discussed the differences between flexible and inflexible thinking and how that might work or not work. The workability of our thoughts is important. Our frontal lobe needs to show up with some consideration of what the emotional brain is trying to tell us or alert us to. And then using shared values as a guide, having that outcome, what kind of outcome would you like to see as a way to shape the mediation process has been very valuable. Questions?
Yeah, one question. The last frame on ladder of inference, in your model, how do you stop the reflexive loop?
What's the utility of the reflexive loop?
No. How do you stop the reflexive loop? Where you have the beliefs pre-selecting the data.
An awareness of that, I think, is helpful. If you can get parents, you want your child to be compassionate, you want your child to be self-sufficient, and they might have a belief that doesn't fit that. They might think that they have to hover, and so you kind of have to check them with, well, wait a minute, if you're talking about, it's an awareness. Your belief is that you have to hover, but yet you said your values were also, it's kind of a contradictory. You wanted them to be self-efficacious, non-dependent. So it's a questioning of the beliefs and how you got there, and then go back down again to how they came to that conclusion. It's not a punitive, this is a model to just try to encourage conversation of how you got there. How did you get to 4? Because it might not seem obvious. And it could be about their belief, and then their beliefs that inform the selection of data. I think there's a gentle, kind way to get people to see how that could be stuck. And if they went a little farther and got different data, they might come up with a different conclusion and a different belief. So it's a real fluid, we want to keep our clients down here so that they can collect data together or make their ladders a little closer together than so far positional wise. I hope that answered your question. Okay. Anyone else? Sir? It's a race.
I'm not sure if I'm adding this to your presentation, but I thought there was a kind of underlying assumption in most of what you talked about, that the parties each would have some hope that your process will be helpful and will work. And I've certainly encountered lots of situations where that's not necessarily the case,
Right.
such as where there's a gross inequity between the power
Powers.
of the
Yep.
different
Mediation
of the
doesn't
different
work when there's a
parties.
power differential.
So, to what extent do your approaches help in situations like that?
I guess I qualify from the very beginning. I'm selective of who I take on as clients. I have the luxury of doing that. And I explain to them that this is not a process of power over. This is a process of really looking at, what's the bells, why do they still push your buttons? Because if they're there for mediation of parenting issues, they have to still be parents even after the divorce. So the value is there to work together and kind of revisit what they assumed before. Does that make sense? And the power, I'll call them right there on the power. I said, that felt like you were trying to, one-up her. And then he or she might say, okay, I'll say that again. They back up from their position and they come forward with a less provocative or power over kind of statement. So it's a lot of work on my part to teach people to talk differently, the quality of their thoughts, flexible or inflexible. That I use all of these words. I have signs all over my office to open, willing, engage, to prime them to really try to find a new way to communicate. I have to say, many a couple have left my office and said if they had those skill sets, they might not have gotten divorced or be going through the divorce process. They just didn't know how to talk to each other without hurting each other.
One last question? Anything coming in from the?
Just a brief announcement for the online audience. You can download the copy of the presentation and the links right from the join page you used to join today's webinar. So you can get those right after the session ends.
Okay.
Great,
Mary,
thank you.
Mary Atwater, we are so
Thank you.
thrilled. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Oh, sure. Thanks for reminding.